Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's Let's Go Zero webinar focusing on green jobs and skills. I think we'll make a start and we're slowly having people trickle in, but just to let everyone know that this will be recorded. It will be up on our website in a couple of days, and then those who have attended or can't attend will be also emailed the link so you can share it with your colleagues as well. So thank you for joining us today. We've got some really great speakers for you. Oh, can't change my slide. We've got some great speakers for you. We've got Danielle and Leah from Colton Hills Community School. We've got Neil from Stony School and Roy from Bright Green Futures. So they're all doing amazing things with students and young people, encouraging them into the green jobs and skills sort of field. But as we know, it's really important in the current day and age. You know, every job in the future needs to have an element of green to them and sustainability. So I'm hoping that you'll go away and be inspired by what our brilliant speakers tell you, and you know, steal their ideas as well. And always, you know, you can drop us an email if you want to get in contact with anyone to ask specific questions. But there will be time throughout this webinar to ask questions. So we've got a Q&A box for you to ask them. But if you do, you know, think of one later on, then drop us an email. So just to introduce you to the campaign very quickly, Let's Go Zero is a national campaign. So that includes Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, working for all schools in the UK to become zero carbon by 2030. And so schools sign up to this campaign. Like any petition, it's just to show that they have an intent and ambition to get to zero carbon, not saying, you know, they're doing everything already, but it's to call on the government for support and funding in order to help us achieve this, and to sort of unite schools, teachers, staff, pupils in this sort of huge journey that we're all facing. There's loads of resources on our website also, so please do go on and have a look. If you go onto our ACT page, we signpost to brilliant organisations, also top tips on you know, what to do in these different areas. So go on and have a look, and you know, do as much as you can, because I know we all know schools have limited time and capacity. But this is something that might help you. Keep an eye out now. We've got our Let's Go Zero IKEA competition that we've launched on the 20th of February. It closes on the 20th of March, and we're looking for brilliant ideas to make your school more sustainable. So this could be creating a hub for sustainability in your school using IKEA products, or a uniform swap shop. Go on and have a look at different ideas that are out there. They're on our website for last year's winners. But yeah, do share. It's quite an easy application form to fill in. But yeah, please apply. We'd love to hear from you. So just to start off and kick things off, I'd like to introduce you to Danielle Webb, who is Head of Geography and Year 10, and Leah McClure, Head of Science and Associate Assistant Head Teacher, Key Stage 5 from Colton Hills Community School. And they're going to be sort of talking to you about the amazing things that they're doing with their students.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully these slides will appear. Can you see that slide?
Brilliant, yeah.
Fabulous.
Fantastic. So thank you. We wanted to caveat this with, obviously, lots of schools do lots of amazing things, and this is just our approach to it. So starting off with engagement in the curriculum and looking at how we can get students enthused about climate change and sustainability. We obviously teach in geography and science lots of sustainability, ecology, but we've shifted kind of how we approach it. So a good example is you get the pictures of turtles wrapped in plastic, and for some students that works. They understand the problem, they care, they get engaged with it. But obviously there's a lot of students who don't really understand the relevance for their day-to-day life. So what we try to do is give them that relevance, give them the why I should care. So for that one, we talk about the microplastics that are found in the ocean and therefore are found in the food and are therefore found now in human bodies. So that makes it personal rather than just global. It really brings it home for them. What we can do from that point then is look at solutions. So how are we able to try and fix this problem? When we're talking about electrolysis, which in science is nobody's favourite topic, we reference how we use those metals. So the fact that their smartphones won't run if we don't do this, so that's why it's important to them. And when we teach about cleaning water, again, in both science and geography, you can see at the bottom, one of the things we do a lot of is posting onto Teams. So I posted this recently, and this is the quite frightening statistic that 80% of our wastewater systems are currently overflowing into rivers and seas in England. So number one, the students have got the really clear context there, and they've got the really personal level of this is going to affect me. We don't teach them these things for fun. We teach them because actually this is their planet. We only have one Earth and it does affect all of us. Now, on top of that, we do invest really heavily here in extracurricular. And there's lots of reasons for this, but obviously there's lots of things that stop schools from doing this. So one of them, the biggest problem, is time. And it does take time. If possible, having certain members of staff who are responsible for certain parts of it really helps. But the benefit of it is so massive. So everything you show them increases all of their exposure to a range of careers. It gives them more cultural capital. You've got a real world context. And I think it's important that we don't always have to go all out with everything. So some of the things we do, as I've just mentioned, are as simple as posting something on Teams, and students can either engage with that or they can choose not to, but at least every student gets the same diet. They all have that opportunity to see it. And sometimes what I post on Teams is as simple as sort of Wellbeing Friday, so they can go and listen to some forestscapes. And sometimes it's a bit more context driven, which I'll come back to in a second. So some of the examples are things like running out of time. So running out of time was a relay where the suggestion was teach the students about climate change in a really relevant way, and they talked about having batons and making the batons. They talked about having an entire relay around the school. Now, we would have loved to have done that, but at the time we actually had lots going on in the building already, and it didn't seem like it was something we could really do justice. So instead we adapted it for us. We did a rowing relay that our PE team organised, because they're fabulous, and they streamed it live to all of the forms. I presented something to all of the forms, so everybody had a really clear idea of what running out of time was about. They got all of the really important messages, and we had that kind of element of taking part in the relay, but we didn't go all out on it because it just didn't work for us at that time. So I think it's always important to take into account that, yes, we want to do all these things, but actually you don't always have to do everything. A free one that's great is I'm a Scientist, Get Me Out of Here. So that gives the students opportunity to speak to people who are currently working in those careers. We entered the plastic zone a while ago. So my year 10s in a lesson, 45-minute webinars that you book, were then able to talk to people working in those careers. So they've got that inspiration. Another great one is the Institute of Research in Schools. So IRIS down the bottom, you sign up to them for free and you get access to real world data and sort of authentic research is the way they put it. And our students get to engage with it in as much detail as they want to. Now for this one, we run it as an after school club, and obviously we have a member of staff who does fantastic work with that. Things like Earth Hour, we promote every single year. You can just go and take the resources from online. So they have social media tags, they have their PowerPoints every year. Because I've done it so often now, I have to change it up. So I do things about nocturnal animals and give them that cultural capital about something slightly different, focus on different careers. And I think the other thing that we've seen is the more opportunities we give the students, the more we get back from it, because we've done things like put out competitions online. And one of my students decided in year 13 to enter Words for the World at the University of Manchester. She won it, as you can see, in the year 13 category, and she went to the University of Manchester to accept her prize. So students can see, A, that getting engaged with this stuff actually has a benefit to them, and B, that other students within the school are doing that. Amazingly, we entered an Eon poster and we won second prize. It went up in Birmingham, and we won .5 grand for recycling bins. And the last one that we really sort of benefit from is ITZA, so itza.io. They do quizzes, and again, the students can choose to take part or choose not to take part. But what's really great about that is it led to us, and we're so proud of this, you can tell from the next slide, it led to us being in the global final. So that's the global final of the original competition, and these are our two amazing students standing there in their video for that particular event. So it just raises the profile of careers and sustainability to the whole school. And it also led to us taking part in the Sustainable Futures pilot, which Danielle's going to talk about.
Thank you, Leah. So as Leah just said, we were really lucky last year to be able to pilot the Sustainable Futures course, which comprised of 4 modules, which you can see the first 4 in front of you. These were about an hour and a half each, so we did one a week and completed it over the space of a month. And at the end, students had some work booklets that they'd completed that they're really proud of. They have them still, and were presented with some certificates to show their achievement. This was a really good experience because it wasn't classroom teacher student based. It was a very different format, so it was lots of discussion, group activity, sitting around a table together, lots of group tasks. So it was informal, but that really benefited the students because it meant that they were in a comfortable, safe space. They were able to share their views comfortably and have a lot of discussions, debates, agreements and disagreements without that kind of pressure of being in a lesson. So it was really beneficial. It took quite a reflective, evaluative stance. So towards the end, students were, making choices and decisions about their lifestyle and how they can change to live a more sustainable life, which had a really big impact, and which was actually really humbling to experience and to listen to, because it showed how much they were benefiting from it. There was lots of case studies involved, which was really good because a lot of names, businesses and organisations were fed through the modules, which allowed the students to, because it was all quite local or quite big names that they'd heard of, essentially, it enabled them to really consider the types of organisations that they want to work for in the future, and in terms of where their careers, where they were going with that, and their kind of values as students they were developing that they wanted to carry forward with them into real life. So you could just see the real kind of beneficial impact that it was having. It was a very positive, kind of fulfilling experience for them, and you could see them coming up with these like realistic, achievable goals and actions that they wanted to carry forward into the future. We are having a similar impact with our eco committee, which you can see them there standing proud, collecting their waste on the top right hand corner. So we're 2 years into our eco committee working towards our green flag, and like Leah said at the start, we are by no means experts in this field. Like I said, we're only 2 years in, so we are quite new to this. But if you're not familiar with the scheme, you get 10 areas that you have to pick 3 to work towards, which are in the top left hand corner. So our committee chose that they wanted to work on our energy supply, our litter, waste and recycling and biodiversity. So they're currently using a grant that the £5,000 that we were lucky enough to secure to consider how we can improve separating our waste, our cardboard and our paper, our food, etc., and how that can be improved. We're fortunate in that we've got a beautiful ground. We've got some large fields and have a very big pond. So our students the committee are working on improving biodiversity. You can see there, they're working with the DT department to create some recyclable bug homes and bird feeders and bug homes. And we've also planted some wildflowers. That's been with the help of the head of DT. And I think one of the most successful, important things about this, as Leah mentioned earlier, is that from a geography and science perspective, we do invest a lot in our curriculum. It is there in the topics, but we also invest a lot outside of it, which means that the students don't just see it as a 2-subject situation. It is across the board. There are a lot of links embedded across all subjects in all sorts of extracurricular. So they see it out of a classroom lesson context, which is having a bigger impact. As well as the running out of time campaign, just to come back to that picture at the top, and the One Tree Day, as well as Earth Hour, we've also taken part, we did last year, in the Big Spring Cleanup. Last year we just did it, like I said, around the school grounds because we are fortunate to have some really large fields, but this year the students want to take it more into the local community. So we're looking at doing it within the parks or the estate that school is on. Moving forward, next year we'd like to change which of the 3 areas that we are working towards. So kind of linking to the waste, recycling and litter initiatives, the students have discussed, for example, having a compost area and growing our own fruit and vegetable, and then they're debating whether they want to feed that back into the canteen and our food supply, or whether it goes, for example, as a food bank in a charitable situation to the community. But it's really nice because they've kind of got this balance. I feel like we're instilling this concept that no idea is too big and no project sustainably is too big to aim for. But we're really starting to overthrow this concept of, well, it's not my problem and it's not going to affect me. And, well, why should I bother because nobody else does? And actually what we're starting to see in our students, which is really nice, particularly with some of our really challenging, vulnerable, smaller cohorts, is this idea that small individual steps can actually encourage others and motivate others to change. And what we're really seeing is those small steps leading to a bigger community impact, which is going to be especially really beneficial when they are thinking about things like careers, because how they feel as about a person and their personal values will determine what kind of organisations they go and work for. So it's nice to know that whilst we're taking small steps, we're having a big impact on their future. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. You really are doing an extraordinary amount, but I just love it how you do weave it through everything. It's not, you know, science and geography, as you were saying. It is in your DT classes, it's extracurricular, they can see it in their day-to-day lives. So thank you for sharing. So I think we'll go on to Neil Strain now, and then we'll have some time for questions. So just to quickly introduce Neil. Neil is the head teacher at Stony Dean, a special school in Buckinghamshire, who has seen climate change as a topic that young people really want to engage with. And as a school, they've made lots of positive steps towards the fabric of the building and in their curriculum. And the next step is allowing students to take these into adulthood and advocate as an advocate of providing students with employment opportunities. So over to you, Neil. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Lovely introduction. I was just going to talk a little bit about our own school journey and the context that we find ourselves in. So I'm the head teacher of a special school in Amersham. So we have over 200 students, the majority of which have autism and other sort of communication interaction difficulties. I guess we started this journey where looking at our own fabric of the building, our own curriculum. And we've done all sorts of things over the years, like we've got sort of 90 odd solar panels on, which has had a massive impact. Talking a little bit about the edges of our fields, for example. So the picture on the left, you can see some of our students that have done like wild seeds that they've sort of spread out. Tiny little space in the school, but it's probably about 400 meters long in the end. Strip that was never used, and the students took it over, rotivated it, covered it in wild seeds, and now for the last 2 years it's this beautiful you know, array of color. It's wonderful. So there's all these things that you can do practically on your school site, as well as things you can do with your curriculum, which make a massive difference. And that sort of led us as part of this journey onto how are we helping our young people achieve employment. So obviously our school, not all of our students don't necessarily follow a traditional pathway. They're not all on GCSEs and A levels. They do entry-level qualifications, things like that. But our real focus in our school is around what employment opportunities can we present for our children when they leave school, and what purpose can they have, which takes us to me talking about a little bit about today. So there's something called the Gatsby benchmarks. If there's any sort of teachers that are familiar with this, it's quite an internationally recognized body. So it's about how you measure work experience and interactions with work experience and higher education and things like that. So we started our journey about looking at these benchmarks. Okay, so what could I do in the school to enable as many opportunities for our students to sort of fulfill some of these things? And what we did with that process is about how we can imbue and interlink and intertwine what local opportunities that we've got within sort of Buckinghamshire and Amersham in all of these different areas. So actually we have a work program from year 7 which tries to maximize opportunities for all of our students around these areas. So what we also have to take into context, particularly with our students, is around how they operate in different contexts. And it's really important for our students to make sure that they have experiences of operating in different contexts, not just in school, as they struggle to sort of transfer situations across. So what they may learn in the classroom around a social interaction or turn taking or something like that doesn't necessarily turn into a lesson in the real world. So it's better to give different contexts for our students to learn in, which is why work experiences and working with different charities and things like that is so important. And it's also worth highlighting that nationally, if you do have a learning disability, the figures vary. I swear I see a different figure every time I look at it, but you're looking around that 4 to sort of 6% of young people in employment. So it is, it's a massive important challenge for schools to think about where their young people go to, especially around their sort of destination data. So what we started thinking about was what our curriculum really looked like for our young people, and our students. They do work-related learning lessons, as we call them, from year 7 to year 13. We have lots of speakers that come into school. They go out as much as possible. I want those lessons to take place in the community in different contexts, to make sure they've really got a good experience of what the world of work looks like. They can learn in that context, learn with adults, learn with volunteers. So in order to try and create these opportunities, which I will get to, I promise, you have to have that sort of context and understanding of how we've created it so they can ultimately be successful as they move through the years at our school. So we started with this partnership with the town council, okay? And I'm just going to show you a load of different tweets, because I sometimes think that's the best way to sort of show the context of what we're doing. So we've got a load of students. They're in year 10. They're in year 10, and they have this great relationship with the town council. So Amersham's quite lovely. It's green. There's lots of great opportunities. It's a nice community. So we just started getting on board these nice context situations. So here we've got some pictures of students that are litter picking. Nice, simple. It's wonderful because they do the interactions with the town council. So they're interacting with adults which aren't teachers from our context. They're giving back to the community. They're understanding a little bit about why actually it's not okay to drop litter in certain places. It's also created a little self-advocacy moment. So I don't know if anyone is from Amersham, but there's an Audi garage and there's a little walkway where everyone goes and has a cigarette, okay? But when the students litter pick the area, they're a bit disgusted by it. And the garage were like, okay, you're right. So the students mentioned, and then the garage then said, well, why don't you come and look at some cars? And the students came and then looked at a load of cars, and they had this really amazing, enriching experience, which came from, that's a bit disgusting. There's a load of cigarette butts on the floor, to this voice of self-advocacy, this believement that actually their opinion counts. They can go and talk to the garage and say it's unacceptable. So you get all these lovely little experiences which stem from, they would be like, oh, what are we going to litter picking for? Whereas actually it stemmed from these wonderful experiences. And actually in this case, you can see from the tweet that actually the ground was too hard. This was earlier on in January, so they couldn't do the tree planting, which was also one of the other projects which they do. So there's a wood, well, it was a field not too far from us. The council really wanted to do something with. So our students have done loads of tree planting there. We've been tree planting there for the best part of a decade now. It's a really awesome, amazing experience, because actually when you've been tree planting for that long, you can really see the impact of your work. But again, you're working with adults. They're doing tasks which are pertinent to them, and they get to see the progress over the years, as our students tend to stay with us for around 7 years. So again, it's a really nice, powerful opportunity, and it's building those social interactions, is working in different contexts, and most importantly, it's engaging in sort of green employment. And again, this is something similar. It's also another project. So we wanted to teach our students to perhaps experience different ways which they can help. So here they're just refurbishing benches up and down the country. They all need refurbishing, and actually but then brings in a whole load of tools and different experiences. You can see here they're in a bit of a depot, so actually the students get to the town council do all sorts of things like it's a bit sad, but they dig graves and they do things like that. So actually they then start to build all these other skills, which then become really important, because in somewhere like Buckinghamshire, you've got, outside of the main population areas, you've got lots of golf courses, you've got lots of stables, you've got all these sorts of jobs which our students really enjoy and they feel comfortable working outside. So it just gives them an opportunity and a belief in themselves that they can do these things. The great thing, the old Christmas trees, they're always wonderful things. There's loads of Christmas trees and they're made every year, and actually, it's really easy just to turn that into mulch and just spread it. Again, it's nice, it gives back, they enjoy it. So all of these things start feeding into their sort of self-esteem. And when I originally looked at this picture on Twitter, I was like, it's just a big pile of leaves. But actually, it also then goes back all the way to our year 7. So we're talking about like our grounds. We've got lots the space, which is really lucky. And believe it or not, that's a hedgehog hibernation pod. I'll challenge you to actually see it. I still can't see when I look at the picture, but my teacher categorically assures me there's lots of these now around the school. But again, that goes into the caring, and actually, you know, some of our students do really struggle to have empathy for others. They do really struggle to have a level of compassion for other people, family, students, etc. And actually, when you start building little moments like this into it, where actually they get to know what a hedgehog is and how they live and how they eat and all those sorts of things, and then create a habitat, then creates the full journey for those students. So you can create different moments. And this is just another picture of the wood, willow wood that we've sort of planted over years, and you can see some of the trees. But again, you know, but then also what they really like about this is in that little plaque, you can't quite see, it does say that our students have planted this. This is kind of our wood that we've sort of adopted, you know, and again, it's a really positive experience for them, and it just gets them into it. And then what this has then led into naturally is that there are other organizations, not just a sort of a town council. There's a local charity called Chiltern Rangers, absolutely phenomenal organization. They work with all sorts of different groups in and around Buckinghamshire, but they have such an overview, and they get used for so many different to maintain different parts. And that's where some of our older students, where we wanted them to be a bit more independent, and again, work with other volunteers and others, so that circle's getting bigger for them. We do lots of volunteer work for the Chiltern Rangers as well. And what's great with a charity like this is when they leave school, they can carry on working for them, they can join volunteer groups. So again, it just gives them that context, and it gives them that purpose. It may not necessarily lead to employment, but it could lead to volunteering work, which is just as important as paid employment for some of our young people. And then the next step is when they're sort of thinking about leaving Stony Dean and moving on, they then end up working for different kind of organizations that have similar sorts of aspirations. So we did a big project with Action for Youth, which was really powerful. And these were year 13, so just before they leave. That was something which they really enjoyed. There was a Watford workshop, which we do work with more around recycling. They went to the London Zoo, which was a fantastic opportunity. This is all relatively recently. And here they were talking more about, well, actually they were taking into action. So what are they doing to be more sustainable? And actually wasn't there, but the conversations I was told was all about, you know, what's the efficiency of the building, all those sorts of things. So actually they were beginning to really engage in that through really simple steps from sort of the hedgehog type stage, all the way through to actually when they're getting out and being more independent in year 14. And then where I'll finish with is actually some of the outcomes of what we've been up to. So actually this is Jack. He left us the other year. He's now got an apprenticeship with the Amersham Town Council. We've got 2 students that now work for them, and you know, he's the perfect role model for our students, because he is the guy on the tractor cutting our lawns. You know, when in the summer holiday, he is the guy that they see and now work with. And also, you know, one of our other students, a guy called Scott, that works for them as well. So actually you then see that product, so you see that journey. Jack was planting those trees, you know, 6 years ago. He's been there, he's been doing the mulching, he's been making the bug hotels for the town council and the different groups that we work with. And actually that has led all the way through into the fact that I like being outside, I like being practical, you know, this is an area I can be successful in. You know, I quite fancy driving a tractor. All those sorts of things that they really got involved with is taking them into that career, which is obviously my school's aspiration and my aspiration for all our young people. And I'll stop there because I can't talk too much.
That's really brilliant. Thanks, Neil. Thank you. I think both schools, both of you are doing amazing things in terms of involving your students in the local context and giving them a real, you know, you can take action on the environment and the climate. It doesn't have to be global. You know, you have to take those small steps in the local context. But if you could stop sharing your slides, and then we'll do a bit of I've got some questions that have come in. So Leah and Danielle and Neil, actually all the questions kind of relate to both of you. So whoever would like to answer, put your hand up and you know, unmute and yeah. So I think the first one is you know, Leah and Danielle, you've just started for a couple of years. Neil, you're really on your way of like sort of developing this green skills and career throughout the school. So when you first started, like that first initial thought process, how did you begin? Where would you advise, you know, other schools who are just starting to go to, and how did you get your staff, your school staff, your teachers on board with implementing these sort of new projects and new ideas? I don't know. Yeah.
Who do you want me to start? I could start, yeah. It's a bit easy for me because I'm the head teacher, so I can kind of do what I want to do in theory. I can sort of crack on and I can move things in a certain direction. I think where it was easy with my staff, where they understood that principle around students learning in context. So actually they see students doing trips and things like that, and actually they realized the benefit of them. So I had examples of success that I was able to sort of replicate, and what I was also able to do is use staff's contacts and people they know, so I can create the opportunities. So it was actually using the informal network of people that people know in order to be able to create that. But I started ultimately with all things is what's your vision like, and the vision ultimately for the school has been creating employable young people. But ultimately, if you're going to create employment, it's got to be based on what's around you. It has to be what's within a bus ride from where people live. So it's about working with the context of Buckinghamshire, which is relatively green in parts, and there are some manufacturing and things like that is everywhere, but it's about what's in that area, what's within 3 or 4 square miles of where the young people live.
Brilliant.
That's useful.
Thank you, Neil. And Leah and Danielle, did you want to come in?
Okay. Yeah, so obviously on the smaller scale, what we did to start with was look at ways we can enhance the curriculum. So identifying the problem for us really was that students weren't engaging with it on a personal level. So our very first attempt at this was to keep it small and make sure we were addressing that issue to start with. Then obviously we talked to staff to see where the interest was, because if somebody's going to run this kind of thing, they have to care about it themselves. So that meant we were able to pick up on, who was happy to do the after school STEM clubs and start to talk to students about those kind of things. Then we started to build the contacts. One of the very first things I ever did was the idea of we'd have an Earth Hour assembly every year. So we started from there, and then we built towards all of those extracurricular opportunities that we offer. So I think that's the biggest thing, looking at the small things you can change so that there's a change in culture. So that shifts first, and then looking at those opportunities and building on each opportunity, because actually most opportunities lead to something else. Earth Hours, the WWF, and then looking at that led to Let's Go Zero. It led to the ITSA competition. It led to them being in the global final. That led to Sustainable Futures. It's one long line that you can follow. So I will say that as head of science, head of geography, we get inundated with offers of all sorts of competitions. So sometimes you do have to say, right, I can't look at that right now because I've got too much on. So I think it's just starting small. And as I say, WWF, Let's Go Zero are both really good examples of places to start where you can just take a little bit each time and then move forward with them.
Yeah, with me, I was part of the eco committee and worked towards the eco schools green flag when I was at school. So I'd kind of got an advantage that I'd already been through it. And then just from, like Leah said in the presentation, there's loads of resources available online. Their website is fantastic. They have so many schools that have achieved their green flag and have loads of supporting ideas that you can then use. So I think part of it was that I'd already been through it. And then the other part of it was, it kind of came down to the curriculum. And I'm sort of thinking, well, if I'm teaching all these concepts, whether it's pollution, waste, sustainability, deforestation, whatever it is, I then also have to believe that myself. Otherwise, I'm a complete hypocrite and I'm contradicting every single theory that I try and embed in the students. And they're quite inquisitive because of the types of vulnerable cohorts that we teach, that I think are quite socially, economically vulnerable, and some are quite sheltered as such, live quite sheltered lives. They ask a lot of questions. So if I'm teaching them, for example, about how to reduce my own carbon footprint in terms of transport and how I get to work, if they then turn around and quiz me about it, like, oh miss, well, what car do you have? I then have to make sure that I live by the principles that I'm teaching. So that kind of got me started on the whole journey of why I wanted to do this and why it was important. And then I was very fortunate that I met Leah and Leah has, like she said, all these amazing contacts and emails that come through, and then we've kind of just gone on the journey together.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I think that's really great. I mean, we get a lot of sort of questions of like, oh, but we're doing this, we can't do that. But it is a process of, pick and choose what you can do, and there are so many organizations out there that can, support you or try and support you. Yeah, no, really great. Thank you. One very quick question before we hand on over to Roy is, both of you take your students out into the communities and undertake sort of lessons in the communities. Where did that begin? Because a lot of schools see that as a barrier, like taking students outside. How do you give your staff that confidence to do that and integrate it into the curriculum, or yeah?
I think from our perspective, I think obviously the key thing which you just touched upon is communication, and then from that communication comes, sorry, we've got lights, we've got motion sensors on our lights.
Eco-friendly.
So I think as long as you communicate it enough in advance and communicate clearly to staff what the point is, then the trust is already there. And I think one of the areas in which we are lucky is what we touched upon before, is there are so many cross-curricular links. So for a lot of work that they do in DT, a lot of the art trips that they go on, a lot of the topics that they're looking at are to do with sustainability, or whether it's recycling or various different concepts. So because we communicate and we have those cross-curricular links, the trust is there. Yeah. Obviously, work with the type of cohort that I just described that we have, like you said, sometimes there is a difficulty, for example, economically, whereby, as we've already touched upon, there are certain things that you just can't do. But actually sometimes that's quite a benefit, because we then keep it local and we do things that don't cost huge amounts. So actually you're demonstrating the point of it, and students can see how you do things for a lesser cost. So actually it's economically sustainable. So just by taking out the trip in that way in the first place, you've half met the purpose and the cause, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's worth noting as well that, again, it does take time, it does take reading all of those emails, but there are opportunities out there where a school like ours will benefit from extra funding. So I can personally say that this year I think we've added over £1,000 to the science budget from various funding streams that we've applied for. So there are lots of places out there, if you look for them, that will support schools to deliver a particular thing, or to take the students out on a particular trip, as long as it sort of satisfies whatever criteria they're looking for. So there definitely is support out there if you need it.
Yeah, thank you. Neil, did you want to add at all?
Yeah, I guess it's for us, it's all about the context of the students are working. It's about encouraging their families. It's about getting that family buy-in, and I think for us, our culture now is so heavily embedded around employment opportunities for our young people. And you sort of mentioned sort of things like trips and stuff, whereas actually probably our most popular trip now is the local recycling facility. The local council run it, and it's now shifted so heavily, I think, in our school, away from just going to the local football stadium or something like that, or going to the Transport Museum in Science, that it becomes quite sort of self-propelling, and that sort of goes into like our STEM events and our STEM days and things like that. So actually, once you get a good movement, actually, and also I find that our staff now are so much more aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it, that actually the pressure from the staff as well as the students it carries the momentum forward, which is quite reassuring, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, great. I mean, keeping it local definitely helps with costs, but then also your carbon footprint of traveling all those students somewhere. And yeah, no.
And to go into the traveling thing, just for example, like we've replaced our diesel vehicles with electric vehicles, and they are cheaper because we use our own solar panels than the diesel ones. So actually, it can be much cheaper.
No, great, thank you so much, both of you, or three of you. So I just want to introduce Roy to everyone. So Roy Kareem is currently the director of Bright Green Futures, an environmental leadership program for 16 to 19-year-olds based in at the Centre for Sustainability in Bristol, that aims to greatly diversify those choosing professions that make positive environmental impact. So over to you, Roy.
Thank you. Let me just get that on full screen. There we go. Oh, sorry, you get to see my massive face twice. Sorry about that. Hey everybody, thank you for having me. Yes, so we are Bright Green Future. We have been going for about 6 years. We're based at the Centre for Sustainable Energy, like Suzanne just said. We originally funded by the National Lottery Community Fund, and now we are primarily sponsored by the National Grid ESO, who are the electricity system operator, who are the people that balance the grid out, and a few other foundations and corporations and stuff like that. We are an environmental leadership and empowerment program for 16 to 19-year-olds around the UK. We are completely free, if that's of interest for anyone on the call. So we pay for all the costs associated with the program. We're a 6-month long program. I can go into sort of what we actually do day to day, but essentially it's about those who already have an interest or a passion for making a positive impact with their future career in the environmental kind of space and sector. How do we sort of catalyze that interest and that passion to something that's going to actually be sustainable in the career sense, not just in the environmental sense? So, you know, the young people that find us, we're not trying to take people with zero interest in environmental stuff and get them to, like, you know, 15%. We're taking people who already have some sort of latent interest and energy around it and trying to sort of take that to the next level. So the kinds of things we do on the program are, by the way, 80,000 hours. If people don't know about that, that's a very interesting resource for careers. 80,000 hours is the number of hours in your career, in theory. But they're all about laddering, you know, your career to the biggest issues in the world, whether that's out of control AI or biotechnology, whatever it might be. But that's sort of some of the approach that we take in terms of, you've got one career, what are you going to do with it? Not that it has to be like a huge making a dent in the universe kind of thing, but I think we're really talking about having some kind of intention behind what you do with that energy that you've got. And, you know, that sort of pie chart, colorful pie chart, is really about thinking, but careers are not the be all and end all of our lives. Like, we have families and relationships, and like, so how does it fit in with all that? And as you'll get the sense, Bright Green Future is very much both sort of careers focused, but also personal development focused. So the reason being is that these days you can't really separate out one from the other, that everything, you know, all these different bits of our lives are kind of intersected, and I'll come on to that a bit more. But, you know, our young people will self-present with saying that, you know, they're feeling quite anxious, so ecological anxiety about the state of the climate. And so, you know, you can't tear apart, you know, mental health issues from sustainability issues, from career issues. What we're trying to do on Bright Green Future is sort of start to look at that as a whole, as a system, as opposed to just like think about traditional kind of careers advice. So one of the ways we do that, and one of the concepts we use, is to start thinking about what we can control and what we can't control. A lot of environmental stuff feels very much, you know, too big to handle. And the flip side of that is probably what I think corporations have been accused of, is making it all about the individual. So, you know, oh, can you put that sweet wrapper in the bin because that will solve climate change? And young people are very like alert to that, going, that's not true, kind of like, as in, how does this affect this? And so one of the things we sort of really get into is, well, you can control what you can do, and then maybe that can influence other people, and then maybe that can sort of ripple out from there. And the other bit, and I'll dive deeper into this a little bit more, is trying to equip our students, I guess, with what we call a career compass. The idea, I guess, behind that is that these days it's pretty unlikely that our young people are going to have the same career for 50 years. That, in fact, the idea of just having a career plan maybe started to go out the window as well. Of actually, what a lot of people are doing are in something for a while and then in something else, and then maybe they go back to the original thing, but there's a lot more sort of shifting around. And how do you begin to navigate that sort of unknown terrain? And like I said, I'll explain a bit more about sort of how we develop that compass, but that's the other bit. And then the last bit, which I'll get into a bit more detail, is about increasing the diversity of the environmental sector in the UK. So that picture, and I'll talk about more of the diversity in the environmental sector, but that picture is one of the key concepts we also talk about is intersectionality. So the idea that we've all got different identities, whether that's to do with sexuality, whether that's to do with religion, whatever it might be. And again, Brightening Future is really sort of thinking about the whole person as opposed to just like one element of their person. And in fact, the power comes from being intentional with what does that give you in terms of your agency when you start to actually think about your life in that way. So like I say, one of the things we talk about is, yeah, what is your sphere of influence? And because of that sphere of influence, what's your ability to affect change? But we are an environmental leadership program. This picture is from when the Great West expansion was happening in the US. Those are buffalo skulls. One of the kind of things we work with is, if people know it, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And one of those key concepts is, how do you decouple the ability for us as a species to flourish without degrading the environment? So like, how do you be, or without exploiting the environment to such a extent that it gets degraded? So how do you decouple those two things? Is it possible? You know, because we've treated it in a certain way where it's sort of an endless resource, but how do we start to shift mindsets away from that? So going back to just sort of really briefly, the state of the environmental sector in the UK. Overall, the labour force is about 19% Black and minority ethnic identifying. In the environmental sector, it's 3.1%. I won't go through all these stats, but 6.3% of staff in leadership teams out of the 100 largest UK charities are people of colour. So extremely low when you compare it to the sort of population as a whole. 34 out of those 100 had no people of colour in their senior leadership teams. So one of the things we're trying to identify or ameliorate with Brightening Future is, how do we get that sector more diverse? And these are sort of students' views, which I think are super interesting about what they are interested in and what these kind of statistics do to them. That second one I think is super interesting, which is actually young people of colour were more likely than their white counterparts to say a career in the environmental sector appealed to them by quite a large amount. And they are more likely to state that a job that contributes to helping the environment was important to them, again, by quite a significant amount. And yet, when you actually go into the employment sector itself, those figures are sort of not represented there. So what's happening? And the other factor we sort of get into with Brightening Future is the idea of what role how we feel and how we belong in the outdoors, in nature, how does that relate to how we are as people, but also what we might want to do with our career. So again, I won't go through all of these, but in terms of quote unquote access to the outdoors and nature connection, I think it's pretty obvious that there are sort of severe barriers to people from both socio-economic diversity and ethnic diversity in actually getting access to the outdoors and how comfortable they feel when they get there. So the actual green jobs bit, I mean, yeah, is this the future of jobs? I mean, there is a whole kind of bit which we can cover around, or which we do cover in the program, of all jobs will be green jobs, right? That's sort of the point, is that there shouldn't be green jobs in the future, because every career that you do should have some element of sustainability. And I think that will, to a certain extent, become inevitable. Like, that will happen just because of the way the world is moving. I think it's really about the pace that happens at, and are they good jobs when people get there? Like, are the working conditions, are the pay good, all those kind of different elements. There are certain sectors which are going to explode more than others, and they will be in what are now called sort of the environmental sector, whether that's renewable tech, biotechnology. If we're going to decarbonize, as we say we're going to do, then the renewable energy sector will be one of the fastest growing sectors, and they're going to need all kinds of different people in there. They're going to need from engineers to maintenance to communications. I mean, there's such big sectors that it isn't like one type of skill and one type of pathway that's available there. The other thing I think that's really interesting about the students that we get, and again, they're often, I'm not going to say they're high achieving, but definitely have an impetus to sort of apply to something like Brightening Future. We don't have any criteria for who we take. That you don't have to have certain GCSE or A-level grades to apply to us. Anyone can apply to us. but a lot of them really are thinking about this idea here of quote unquote designing your life, and they're really thinking about this idea of how do I create this career pathway for myself. And there's quite a lot of anxiety around that, there's quite a lot of pressure around that. What we're trying to give them is both a sense of a lot of this is up for grabs, but also how do you actually start to build that pathway for yourself? Like, what tools can you use to do that? And I actually just came across this today, which I think maybe touches upon quite a lot of stuff we're talking about, which is a large amount of workers, and these were young workers they were interviewing, are anxious about the future of the planet, right? Fair enough. But now more and more generation, the next generation, so Generation Z, are saying that where they work should take responsibility for making the place better. 50% of them believe that their senior leaders don't care about that and are only driven by their own gain. And 45% of them, so almost half, said they would consider actually changing jobs if the values of the company don't align with their own. So companies themselves are really having to now start to think about, like, how can they get away from the kind of greenwashing kind of examples? And there you go. And 50% have already said they've actually moved away from their current job because of this. And this is this sort of idea of conscious quitting. You've probably heard of quiet quitting, and now this is kind of conscious quitting of like, okay, actually, my values don't lead me when I walk out of my flat door. I want to take them to my workplace. And how does it actually start to show up? So, you know, just to go into a tiny bit of detail, is I said this idea of a career compass. Right at the center of it is this idea of a why, so something bigger than yourself, a purpose. The how is about, like, what are you good at, what's important to you, your strengths, your values. And then the what is, how does that, when it meets the world, what does that actually look like in terms of action? So yes, we talk about this in terms of careers, but we also, as I think I sort of pointed out, that colorful pie chart at the beginning, how does this show up in your relationships? How does this show up in your community? How does it show up in your faith or your spirituality, whatever it means? Because we know from all the data that sustainable careers have some element where they have to be aligned with your values, because if they're not, at some point it's going to break down and you're going to shift to something else. So we've worked with about 350 students now over the last 6 years. We're about to start with a new cohort of students next month, and that'll be, our cohorts are 25 students from all around the UK. And we just basically do those cohorts on a rolling basis. So the next one will start in August, and then the springtime after that. I'll put our website in the chat, because yeah, basically any 16 to 19-year-old around the UK can apply. Like I say, it costs us about 3-4 grand per student to run the program, but that's entirely covered by us, all the travel, all the accommodation, all the food, because we have a residential and things like that. But yeah, if you ever want to get in touch, please do. And that's me done.
Amazing, thanks, Roy. That's really brilliant. And yeah, I do love that holistic. It's not just careers, but it's sort of your whole life. You kind of you need to be conscious of what you can do in your bubble, and then hopefully have those knock-on effects. And I think actually Leah and Danielle mentioned it in their school of the students take action and they work in their communities and take it to their families. So yeah, definitely. No, thank you. So just a couple of questions for you. Is that, how do students get involved in Bright Green Futures? What's the process?
I'll stick the link in the chat momentarily. I should really know my own website address, but apparently I can't type it properly. I mean, basically they fill in a super simple kind of application form. We are I think we're just about full up now for the cohort that's going to start, but then the next one will be July, August onwards. And yeah, they just fill in their details. There's a couple of simple questions and they put it in. We try and weight it, or try and get the majority of students at the moment from Black and minority ethnic, but as in like about half, not as in the majority, but just to try and help with that skew in the environmental sector. We're always looking for young men as well, because we're always heavily skewed to young women. But yeah, that's how they get involved.
Yeah, amazing, thank you. And then in terms of, you've got your program, but for a schools audience, schools watching this, what sort of tips do you have for schools in providing information to students to get them into green jobs? Or
yeah, I mean, I do actually, our young people having like the 80,000 hours website is kind of slightly overwhelming, but it is actually like it's actually a really good resource. It's not just about green stuff. Like I say, it's about all the world's big issues. And what, I mean, I don't know if this is that useful, but one of the conversations we often have with our young people is they often want quite a linear plan about, okay, if I do these, like if they're doing GCSEs and then maybe they're doing A-levels, and then half of them are thinking about apprenticeships and half of them, and they're always kind of going, oh, well, they get those A-levels and I'll get into like that university, for example. And one of the things we try and do in the program is kind of to go, life doesn't quite work like that, in terms of, you know, to be able to sort of do that kind of chess game is actually sometimes not that useful, and actually to have a more, I don't know, strength or value-based approach to thinking about everything is actually much more useful than trying to actually play out what a career pathway looked like. I think is quite a complicated thing. And the other thing, which I think both of or all three of the previous speakers, is getting them to have conversations with people who are actually doing those jobs is so valuable. Because the young people that we work with, I think they're so hungry to talk to people who aren't, no offense, their teachers, who aren't their parents, but who maybe just have that kind of real world experience to go, hey, like when you were 16 or 17, what were you thinking about? And how can I sort of do what you were doing?
yeah, definitely. I can 100% relate to that as well. I think at school, my favorite sort of career stories were hearing people who suddenly changed careers and like moved into a completely different pathway, because it was, to me, it was unheard of. Like you kind of had to pick your stream, but it's, you know, like you say, the world doesn't work like that. You sort of jump around, and yeah. No, thank you so much, Roy. So thank you to all our speakers. Really, really, yeah, brilliant stories, doing amazing things, and I hope we've given everyone watching this some sort of food for thought and some sort of guidance to implement this in their schools, or, you know, if you're a young person into your life, and hopefully you'll be in touch with Bright Green Futures, because it's a brilliant program. I think if anyone has any questions, please do email us at letsgozero.org, and we can send your questions on if need to, or we can just get back to you ourselves. This recording will be on our website with all the useful links that were mentioned underneath, so you can come back and rewatch it and click through the links. So thank you, everyone.